Welcome to the session on crafting content that converts. I'm pretty sure most of you in the room, with a show of hands, how many of you are already creating content? How many of you are happy with its performance? Okay. All right, so that's what we're going to talk about today. So just so I have a sense of the kind of content everybody's creating right now, how many people are doing blogs? Is that the primary form of content? What other forms of content are you creating for your audience? Video? Social media, podcast? What else? And, okay, so we got a good mix here with the type of content that you're creating. And how do you go about planning your content? So when you think about the type of blog post that you're writing, does anyone here have a documented strategy that you follow? Or you're just like, we're doing blog posts, and you just kind of come up with topics on the fly, same with podcasts? Yes, no? Documented strategy, like you're for sure following one versus no documented strategy. Okay, so why do I ask this? So when we create content, even though like this presentation, for instance, piece of content, once they get my output, you'll see it. But you want to tailor your content to your audience. And so you want to have a sense, no matter what, that you're personalizing it to who you're reaching out to so it adds value to them. So when we just kind of go back to the basics of content marketing, really what you want it to do for you is to attract an ideal client that leads them to a profitable action for your business. I mean, in a nutshell, I mean, that's pretty much what Content Marketing Institute says for it. So for us as financial advisors, the way that your content works for your audience is that it allows you to not only hopefully attract your ideal customer, but you're nurturing them. So I'm going to go out on a limb here and say most of you are probably still getting the majority of your business from referrals and centers of influence, right? Is anyone here just blowing up their business with leads, from random people that are Googling financial advisors? One person in the back? Okay. But the majority of us are trying to nurture existing relationships and really take the referral marketing to the next level. And that's what content marketing really does help us do. So how do we do that? How do we create content that's actually going to drive people to your website, drive them to your business, to pick up the phone to call you, to really reinforce that positive perception that you want them to have? And so there's a way in content marketing that we go about doing this, and it includes, starting with a strategy. And so for those of you who have a documented strategy, this might sound a bit repetitive. For those of you who don't, I'm hoping to kind of walk you through, what I wind up doing with my clients to say, where do we start? That's like the biggest question when I work with other financial advisors or just other folks in the financial services industry. Where do I start when it comes to a content strategy? We start with the way you guys all start with your clients. What are you trying to accomplish? Think about those conversations that you have with your clients, and when they come to you and they're saying, I feel financially stressed. I don't know how to allocate my money. I don't know how to reach my goals. I don't even know what my goals are. Well, I follow a very similar model to you all. I sit down and I say, what from a business perspective are you ultimately trying to accomplish? That's number one, like big scale. Maybe you're trying to grow your firm, X amount of revenue. Maybe you're trying to bring on a new market, whatever it is. You document that first. Then from your marketing perspective, well, what are you doing already and where are the gaps in your marketing? So when you look at your business goals and then you think about your incremental marketing goals, what are some of those goals that you have? Is it, I want to increase my subscribers. I want to have more of an audience, my own audience, and I want that to grow. And why is this important to you? So these are all of the places that we start from marketing strategy. Also, think about your brand story. So what is it? This is one of the biggest questions when I ask my clients. They get that deer in a headlight look in their face. What makes you different? If I were to ask any of you, is any of you bold enough to raise your hand and tell me what makes you different than the other folks in the room? Can be a paralyzing question, but it's one that you can think through, and maybe you're differentiated on service. Maybe you're differentiated on technology. Maybe you differentiate yourself just based on the market that you serve. What is that one thing? When you're thinking about creating content, be clear on what that one thing is And that comes into your second bucket when you're thinking about your brand. And why does that story matter to your clients? Always, I think back to the way the financial services industry, and like kudos to everyone in this room because you are all taking it to the next level. But you used to go to advisor websites, and what did they say? Me, me, me. I am a financial advisor. This is what I do. I, me, we statements. And as you know, the consumer is looking for a conversation. You're looking to have a conversation with your audience. And so when you're thinking about your content strategy and you're thinking about what you should be prioritizing, what do they want to know? What is it that how can you tell a story that matters to them? Maybe you are serving an underserved market. Maybe it's, startup women business owners, just as an example. Is your article or your content going to look the same as somebody who is serving high-end executives in the pharmaceutical field? No, it's going to sound different. Your tone's going to be different. The topics that you're going to talk about are going to be different. And so once you just start getting a little bit clearer about who you are, what you're trying to accomplish, then you start funneling down into what matters most to them. And this brings me, I wish I had my slides, guys, to buyer personas. How many of you have documented buyer personas? Okay, I want to walk you through that right now. If you have a pen and a paper, just jot down some notes, because I really think that your content can't be effective, truly effective, and really convert if you don't know who your audience is and you don't document these things. And so a buyer persona is basically, think about your favorite client. Favorite, like the best one. If you could have 100 of these clients, this would be the person that you're writing about. Give them a name. Pull a picture, their picture, stock picture, whatever. You could do this in Word. You can write this down. This doesn't have to be overly complicated. And who are they? Basic demographic information first. So what's their job? How old are they? Do they have a family? Those where do they live? So some of you might be geographically centered businesses where you're just serving the Portland area, and some of you are serving all 50 states. So have your demographic information listed. Secondly, what are their pain points? Okay, so here's these individuals. What do they care about most? What is it that they struggle with? This is where you can dig in, where you're thinking about content topics that really matter to them. What challenges them day to day? It might have nothing to do with finances. Write it down anyway, because the clearer you are about your audience and what they care about, the better you can even tailor your financial subject matter to that need. And so perhaps one of their struggles is they have no time. They're busy. They're working constantly. Maybe their spouse is working constantly. They have kids that are in 1,000 sports programs. So how might a financial advisor appeal to a potential client who struggles with time? Oh my gosh, you guys, you answer that question because you're taking that financial burden from clients. And so that could be a content topic all in of itself. So I'll just, keep throwing out ideas. Just write them down. Do it. Just write about things like that. The other thing, what are their responsibilities? So aside from just challenges that they might have, what are some of their responsibilities? Their day-to-day things that they're responsible for. So I like to kind of refer back to business owners. I tend to work with a lot of business owners myself. And so what are some of their, they're looking for systems and processes and things like that. People like to work with people that they like. You know that. Your clients aren't just clients. You're looking for long-term relationships with these folks, and so are they. So if you can demonstrate to them through content that you understand where they're coming from, what their challenges are, that you can relate to them, and that you're helping to answer a question, wonderful. And then the other thing that you want to make sure is in a buyer persona, what are their objections to your services? What are they? Think about the things that when you're sitting down with a prospect, if you're not able to close them, what are their reasons? Is it the fees? Is it the structure? Is it the commitment? Are they not qualified? So maybe this could also be something where maybe they're not saying no to you, you wind up saying no to a bunch of clients. So what's happening? Are you attracting people that aren't quite your ideal? All these things, write them down in your buyer persona of your ideal one. And then lastly, what value do you individually and your firm bring to a relationship? You want to write this down because this reinforces to you in your mind exactly the value that you're bringing to that persona, this one in particular, because you can have one or you could have 10. You're not limited to how many of these buyer personas that you have, and some might have some overlapping qualities. But like I said, you might have a female entrepreneur and you might have a male manager. You might have, and I know you guys don't do this anymore, but anyone with money is not your ideal client. So I come from your world. I used to be an in-house marketing director for an RIA firm here in San Diego. And when we would, I would talk to the CEO. I'm like, okay, let's identify, our ideal client. Who is he? Who is she? Well, it's anyone with 500,000 minimal investable assets. Okay, no, it has to be deeper than that. You know why? Because your ideal clients don't look at themselves that way. They don't walk around identifying themselves as the amount of investable assets that they are. So do not put that on your website. If you do have your minimums, don't make that a centerpiece. That's all I'm saying. Because you don't identify yourself that way, and neither do they. And so this is the value. So once you have these buyer personas documented, you can always refer back to them. You bring on new team members. Oh my gosh, you can just say, here's our target audience. It's clear to everybody across the board. Chances are not one person at your firm is creating content. You might have someone who writes, but you might have your advisors who are willing to be content matter experts who are giving input. Maybe you have a marketing person who's doing it. So it's nice to have something central that everyone can just know. Okay, this is who we're going after. Here's who they are. When we create a piece of content, does this appeal to any one of these people? If it doesn't, toss it, Don't put it out there. And again, if you aren't speaking to someone specifically, you run the risk of speaking to nobody. And so that is the point of personalizing that content experience. It's so in line with your customer-centric value system as financial advisors. You don't treat every person who walks through the door exactly the same. It's about a relationship. And so you can take that content and make it just as personal by writing it for a specific audience. So that's, very much part of our marketing strategy. So then where do you go from that? Okay, so we've talked about why we are creating a content strategy, what we're trying to accomplish. We talked about who is our audience, and how do we properly document who they are so we can tailor that content. Well then, what? Okay. You guys are creating blog posts. You're already creating content. How do you prioritize which content you create? Most of you are creating content, but most of you weren't very happy with its performance. And so, when you look, I would say this. You don't have to do everything. When I talk to a lot of my clients, they get overwhelmed. They're like, oh my gosh, you play the comparison game. They're running a podcast. They're off speaking in all the circuits. They publish every day. And they're sending emails, everywhere. What does your audience want, and what's working? So I'm going to ask another question just to put you on the spot. Is anybody tracking their content performance? Clicks, things like that. And how, what do you use?
I just use Google Metrics.
Google Metrics. Okay, so you have a little tag on your content, and you can see if they click and then get redirected to your website pretty much. Anybody else using anything? Like emails, so when you send an email, most email marketing providers have metrics. Are you checking in on those things?
Yeah.
No one in this room needs to analyze over data and analytics. The only reason why I'm bringing up this part is that sometimes you do want to check in to see which blog posts performed the best, which email had the highest engagement, and why. Hopefully, you're on a schedule, and you keep yourself on a schedule for at least a month. You publish regularly, you publish at the same time, you send emails at the same time, and then you just check in and you say, what was my click rate? What was my open rate? And then if you had higher, that's great. Maybe you stick with that for a while. Maybe after a quarter doing that, you go back and you're like, you know what? This series of blog posts totally failed. Did not hit anybody. Maybe you don't write about that anymore. Or maybe you're just publishing and you're not doing anything with it. so, it wasn't too long ago where you could write and they would come because there wasn't that much competition for content, like back in 2008, when this whole thing was just like, woo, getting crazy. Now there's so much content out there, it's really hard to break through the clutter, and just because you put it out there doesn't mean anyone's going to pick it up. So then we come to, okay, so what are you creating? Prioritize that. Check your performance on your content, just so you have insight and you can adjust. Maybe a certain topic really killed it. Maybe retirement planning is just overdone, guys. Or the way that it's being done repetitively needs to change. Maybe instead of talking about how to retire, you talk about how to spend. Maybe you just change the conversation a little bit. You talk about cash flow management instead of debt consolidation. I mean, you can talk about the same thing in a different way. And have you asked your clients? So if you're ever wondering, what should I be writing about? What type of content should I be producing? Survey your clients. What kind of questions do they ask you? Like, think about that. Like, when you sit down with a prospect and things like that, or your clients, what are some of those frequently asked questions that you might get? Maybe keep a tally. Make someone at your firm just keep tabs of what those things are, because those are great content ideas. That is what your audience wants to know. And so, a lot of times we just guess, right? We're just like, I think that they would want to know this. But they're only an email away. And the other thing, when you ask clients, they tend to really like that engagement. I have never really talked to a client who said, you know what, when I asked my client what they might be interested in, they were really uninterested to share their feedback with me. I mean, clients, especially your good clients, like, they're so interested in helping you because you're helping them, and they're very, they're willing to engage and give you that real-time feedback. So that's really important. So think about which content you want to produce, and then which channels you should be on. So hopefully no one in this room thinks that social media is, your clients aren't on social media. My grandmother-in-law is 85 years old, and she is all over Facebook. So, maybe not every channel your clients are on, but there has to be some channel, because we're so connected to our devices. We're a connected world. And so it doesn't mean you need to be on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, Snapchat. You don't need to be on all of them. I always recommend pick one channel, master it, and then move on to the next one. Why? Because it's consistency over time. It's tracking and making sure that it's working. That way you invest your time. Like, how many of you feel like you have time for all this? Like, is some of this just like feeling like, gosh, I just don't want to do any of this, because this just sounds like that's what you're for, Lisa. Like, having to track all that. So don't get overwhelmed with the logistics of it, because honestly, you could probably hire an intern right out of college who's like a social media wizard who just was born that way and could help you get it scheduled. It's just really, where is your audience? You know your audience better than anyone. Find out, are you on Facebook? Are you on LinkedIn? You probably know. And you want to be on LinkedIn. 82% of, there's an 82% success rate pretty much with LinkedIn. It's one of the most popular social media channels, not just for reach, but also for engagement. So many of your centers of influence are on there anyway, that's a no-brainer, if you're creating content for them. So Twitter is another one. I don't know if your clients are on Twitter, but if any of you have interest in influence, like connecting with influencers, being known as a thought leader, connecting with media, Twitter is going to be a good channel for you as well. So once you figure out what type of content you really want to focus in on and where you want to be, then you focus on those channels. Okay, there it is. So then the how. So how do you attract them? So once you build all of this, like so many of you are doing, how do you actually attract them to your content? How do they find it? You share it, you share it, and you share it. What happens is you publish something and maybe you blast it out once, twice, and then it doesn't consistently get promoted. As much time as you spend creating content, you want to spend so much more time promoting it, and that's like repetitively. So it's not saying every single day you promote it. It's like, I promoted it this month. I promoted it next month. I promoted it a year from now. You maintain your content. You don't write it once and leave it. Go back to have a schedule where you kind of go back to old blog posts, old podcasts, anything like that. Is there something new you could say about it? I mean, maybe you were writing something about, I don't know, like financial misconduct. Oh wow, Wells Fargo, just had a big thing happen. Maybe you could repurpose, that piece on how people can protect their identities or make good, sound decisions when it comes to choosing a financial advisor and make it relevant again. So it's just keeping pulse and continuing to put it out there. The other thing that you can do is what maybe so many of you have done since you've been connecting today and this whole week is interview each other. Interview somebody else who has an audience that you'd like to be in front of. And you can collaborate on content, and then when you have collaboration between the two of you, or the few of you, you can be tagging each other, and they're going to share it with their audience too. This is something that works really well, especially in symbiotic relationships like centers of influence and things like that. They have clients that you'd like to work with, and you have clients that they'd like to work with. Well, hey, why don't you write a white paper or put a guide out or do a blog post or a podcast? This works really well with podcasts. Who are my podcaster people? Yeah. Interview people on your show, and then they're like, oh my gosh, I was on the show, or I was, quoted in this blog post. I mean, we all have egos, and we like people to see like, hey, I'm a thought leader. And so that's another way that you can give content more legs, to go out there and to reach the people that you want it to reach. So you keep publishing. You don't stop. Keep sharing it. Don't stop sharing it. Refresh your content. Think about other relationships that you can involve in your content that add value. Remember, you always want your content to add value. But who else has an audience that you'd like to be in front of, and does it make sense, to maybe work with them on some content pieces? The other thing that you could be doing, make sure that you're emailing it. So sometimes we publish things. I don't know if you guys, have a regular email marketing, process going on where hopefully it's set up where you publish and it emails, or you have a regular newsletter that goes out. But don't forget the low-hanging fruit, the people who you have, who are already subscribed to you, who are already fans. Sometimes we get lost and we're just trying to reach them out there, where everybody who's in your close circle is already connected pretty much to the people that you want to know too. So that's why referrals work so well. Yeah?
So on the newsletter front, you said it's share, right?
Yeah.
But we have clients on our list, right? So we've been wrestling how often you send a newsletter. I get to send it at the same time every week.
Yeah.
So we have a prospect list in MailChimp, so to speak, and then a client list. And clients get weekly emails from us because they want it.
Yeah.
Prospects, if you overwhelm them, then they're just going to unsubscribe, right? So.
Well, have they unsubscribed? So you're always going to have people who unsubscribe, but don't make assumptions. Be careful not to make assumptions that they don't want. So did your prospects, let me ask this question. Do your prospects opt in? So do you have a permission-based prospect list? Or is it, I met somebody and I added them to my prospect list, but they didn't sign it? That does make a difference.
They do now.
Okay, yeah. So if you have prospects who have subscribed, who have opted in, they want to hear from you. They have said, here's my information. I want you to contact me. Be careful, though, if you are meeting people out, like at conferences, and you add them to your prospect list, and now all of a sudden they're getting emails, and I'm like, I didn't subscribe to this. Aren't we all picky about that? I get emails from people, and I'm like, I did not want this. I have too many emails in my inbox already. And so your question about how often, how often should I do this? I tell my clients once a month for prospects, once a month. But really, it depends on what you're trying to accomplish, right? So, and what are you trying to offer, and what are you saying? A newsletter is not just a good thing to do just for the sake of doing a newsletter. With content marketing, you want to reinforce the value that you deliver, and so anything that you send, if you have not heard of Chris Brogan, or you're not, he's a big content marketer figurehead, he has a great newsletter that he uses. Everything he sends is relevant. He could be selling me something, and I'm still reading his emails because it is so applicable to me and what I need. And he'll send them bi-weekly. So he sends them every other week. So you could do bi-weekly, you could do monthly. If you had a lot of value to deliver, say you're hosting an event or something like that, and you're trying to, let people know about the event, and then also like giving them something in addition to that, there are times when you could do more because it warrants more. But emailing people for the sake of emailing them just to be like, loud noises is not enough. Like, no loud noises. Think about, what am I giving these people? Do they want it? And if you think that they want it, send it. And if you're not sure, just look at the subscribe rate. And don't be too discouraged, right? If people unsubscribe, you kind of want people to opt out, to select out, because not everyone is your ideal client, right? And it's okay. It's quality over quantity. It is always quality for you guys over quantity, because not everyone is going to meet your minimums. Not everyone is going to, be the financially, like maybe you are really wanting to work with avid savers, or maybe some of you do work with people who are, trying to get their financial lives on track. There's enough of you, right, where it's not really competition, it's just who do you really want to work with. So don't worry about the unsubscribe rate unless it's just like, wow, man, everyone's like mass exiting my list. This is, troublesome. I wouldn't worry about that. And that's interesting, because then I was just getting to the when here on my list here. So something that I tell my clients and what I work with my clients, that when is critical, and you really have to give it 3 months. 3 months, guys, where you're consistently scheduling and monitoring. This goes for email marketing. This goes for social media. This goes for your blog schedule. Give it a few months, because it really does take that long to really pull any meaningful data about its performance. You can't tell something unless you're like running like a promo, like we're selling shoes for $1. Like, you can't tell in our world when it comes to professional services, because we're not selling any hotcakes. We're making ourselves available for folks because we know that they could use our services, and we want to be their top of mind when they finally get to that point where they're like, yeah, I need to talk to somebody. And so give yourself 3 months, set it and forget it, kind of like, what you do with your passive investing. Like, I'm going to do Twitter posts twice a day, 3 times a day at these times. And if you use services like Hootsuite or Buffer, they can optimize that timing scheduling for you, and tell you like, hey, just based on what we've been seeing with your followership and things like that, these are the optimal times to send. It takes the question out for you. And so you could just schedule those things in advance and just be good and stick with it. And so the other thing, this is the same that you will say to your clients. If they have financial goals, you know that you're helping them with their finances, but there is so much work that they need to do on their end, and you help hold them accountable. You need to hold yourself accountable with your content strategy, because consistency is key. So if you write one and then you go a few months without writing or publishing, or if you start strong with social media and then you kind of pitter away because you're just seeing like incremental increases, you have to give yourself time, give yourself a little bit of grace too, and don't expect like, okay, since I'm now doing this, I expect like confetti and like the bells to go off. Like, no, it's kind of like working out. Like, you're not going to have a six-pack the first time you do a set of sit-ups. It takes repetition. And so your marketing is the same way. And so give yourself time. Be consistent, stick with a program, and then reevaluate every 3 months, every quarter, and make adjustments. And they're probably just going to be minor adjustments. I have seen with my clients, it's amazing. I'll get to you, yeah. They just stick with the program, and by 6 months in, they have regular subscribers. Why? Because we focus their content. We scheduled their stuff regularly. Their audience knew where to find them. They always showed up. And they put calls to action on their content, which I'm going to get to next. But I want to answer your question.
What do you mean by reevaluate after 3 months?
So when you look at your content performance data, so whether you're using Google Analytics or, and it's really, I think, Google Analytics for your blog posts or your podcast to see, are you driving more traffic to your website? you can set goals for this. So I don't want to get too much in the weeds on the analytics portion, but the metrics that I like to follow for my clients, traffic to website, and more than traffic to website, it's what kind of traffic to the website. It's because you can tell with Google Analytics and others, the demographic, the people that are actually coming. Time on page, I think that's a powerful metric. Are people reading what's on your website? Are they sticking around? Are they going from page to page? Or are they just bouncing off? Like, you have a very high bounce rate. And if you do have a high bounce rate, you could have Fisher, like those spammy bots on your website, so you would have to look into that. But time on page, and then conversions, okay? So that's why we're talking today. Is your content set up with a clear call to action, which is my next point that I wanted to get into, which is you can have a great piece of content, and does it tell anybody to do anything? Does it move anybody to action? Or is it just interesting? We are not a PR company. We're not just sharing news. You're a business, and you want to get leads, and you want to bring people into your business. And content attracts people to your business, and then hopefully they pay you in their information. They give you their email address. This is the goal of content marketing. Email addresses, contact information. Like, aside from adding value and nurturing existing relationships, on the lead side, it's to get leads. It is to convert people, to have them actually do something. And so, for instance, on bottom of blog posts, you can offer them something. You can say, schedule time with me. You know, if you're looking for a financial advisor, it could be like that, and you could put that on all your blog posts. And lo and behold, people do sometimes click those. You know, it's just like a reminder. You could, if you guys have offers, how many of you have like a download, like you have a guide or something? Do those work well for you? Better?
It kind of depends.
What?
On if we for Facebook, it works really well.
Uh-huh.
If we're trying to do something through Twitter, not so much. Just kind of depends on the lead-in.
What kind of offers are you guys creating? So I want this to be, you know, like as you guys have questions, keep shooting them at me because I really want to help answer your specific questions. So. Free financial guide. What about yours?
We do a webinar and a financial guide.
Okay, webinars.
Work better.
Webinars, yeah. And for your financial guide, what do I get? Like, what is it?
It's specific to the target demographic.
Okay. So I think financial guides are great. I think checklists are great. I think there are probably too many budget spreadsheets out there, you know, that people can download. They can get it from you. They can get it from Investopedia. You know, there's so many places. Downloadable offers are great because if you can offer them something. So I worked with one of my clients, and we created a money prioritizer kind of guide. And this was not like it was more like, how do you think about money? Like money psychology. This is like a hot button kind of thing that your audiences are probably interested in. How do you feel about money? Are you and without using the jargon of what is your risk tolerance, I think that offers that sometimes work on the psychology side of personal finance will have higher conversions because people are curious about themselves. So if you can help them understand themselves better and how they feel about money or how they, you know, what their investment style might be, I think you might find a lot of interesting success with things like that. Simply because, like I said, people are curious about themselves. It's shareable, you know, and you can even have, I mean, there's tools out there if you wanted to make like interactive surveys as well. I mean, how many of you have filled out like a survey of like, which Disney character are you? I mean, why do we do that? I mean, it's so, we totally overthink this whole thing because people really just don't want to spend that much. They don't want to spend their free time while they're on their phones thinking about like, oh, I suck at finances. Like, man, I'm just rotten. No, they want to watch cat videos and they want to, you know. So I know that in our industry, you know, we're boring, you know, like, oh, money is not boring. Money, you know that money is not boring. So there are ways that you can just make it more interesting, more engaging, and that's the point. So what I'm leading up to next is, you know, you are able to convert content that's engaging with your audience. And so I wish I had sorry guys, I don't have my slides. But I wanted to read you guys a list of some of the content topics that people crave. Interestingly enough, it happens to really coincide with all of the values that you tend to reinforce through financial planning. This is why I think that this is like a gold mine, that content marketing, because like we're not going to be advertising like crazy. You know, who picks up the phone and calls that financial advisor or that lawyer who's like all over the TV, you know, for mesothelioma, if you've seen that one, you know? But it reinforces to them life's priorities. So content that reminds them that life is short. Content that reminds them that their life matters. Content that's engaging to them because it's entertaining to them. So I have like, when I work with clients, I'm like, it either has to entertain them or it has to educate them. And it is so much better if it can do both. And you can entertain people through a blog post simply by how you write it. Are you antiseptic, boring, like the dry eye commercial guy when you write a blog post, or can people really tell your personality? Because chances are everyone in this room is a really excellent networker. You're probably super engaging to talk with. Your clients can't wait to get on the phone with you. So does that come across in your copy? Does that come across in your other content that you're creating? And you have your own style and your own isms. Like maybe you talk in metaphors all the time. Maybe you like to use visual graphics, pictures. Oh my gosh, visual content moves more than just written content. Do those little, maybe you have like quote sayings, you know, that you believe in. Jazz those up, share those. They get shared. I mean, that's engaging because people like that sort of thing. And you want to know why people will share things? It's because it gives them, it's social currency. So people will share things if it makes them look good, or if they know that somebody else is going to really enjoy that. So think about the last time you shared something with either your network, like your social network or not. Why did you share it? It was funny. Maybe it made you cry. Maybe it was like, oh my gosh, such a powerful story. You guys have an arsenal of stories. Your clients can't give testimonials, but you can tell hypothetical stories. You can tell your client's story without naming them and change some details around, but you can actually tell stories. And your stories matter. I mean, when I worked at the RIA, one of the advisors, he was really big on philanthropy. It was his mission. Like he was later on in his career, and all he wanted to do was help to give away millions of dollars and help his clients be able to do that, the ones who were philanthropically inclined. And the power of that gifting and like how it changed clients' lives because they were giving money away and they had no idea, you know, how good that would make them feel. You know, we could use more of those stories, you know, out there, you know, from you, because you guys are the front lines of the life change that occurs in clients' lives. That's what they're looking for. You know, they're not necessarily thinking like, I need a budget. No, they're thinking, I want to be financially happy. I want to be financially secure. I don't know what that looks like. You know, how can you help me feel better about money? And maybe some of your clients, and I don't want to talk all like the touchy-feely stuff, because you might have some clients who are like investment-centric and they want to look under the hood of the car. So your content will look different if, you know, you have like real analytical clients who really want like that sort of thing. But for my purposes for today, you know, I really do think that what moves people to read content, engage with content, and share content has a little bit more to do with them and less to do with you. And yeah.
A quick question. How should we best use a client advisory board to gain information on what kind of content they would like? Is there a survey we could provide or ideas on a survey online that you can give me ideas on?
That's a great question. So she asked, if you have an advisory board, how can you survey them about the content that they would really like? Well, I think it depends how big is your advisory board.
12 people.
12 people. I might do the personal interaction and just talk to them, you know, pick up the phone and call them and just say, you know, work with them like a partner. You know, we're want to brainstorm with you on some content ideas. Here's what we're seeing is working really well, but you're so involved in our client base. You know, you really understand the market. You really understand what we're trying to accomplish. You can also do surveys, email surveys, but I would always follow up with a phone call, right? Like, don't those just feel better? You know, especially when you're trying to have people share their insights with you. Sure, you could do a survey. If you do multiple choice, though, you might be leading, you know,
I don't mind this face-to-face right
Yeah.
now. I'm just going to use the same questions.
Yeah, I would definitely do an interview. And
Any
also,
suggestions on where I could find one or one that's already created that I can customize to what we're looking to do? So I know I'm asking generally the right questions.
yeah. I have a list of questions, you know, like interview questions that I have prepared. So we can follow up after this because, you know, questions that you can ask your clients, questions that you can ask your COIs and stuff. I've created a list of those, and I've gotten those lists from the clients that I work with, and we've used those to see how those work. So I'd be happy to share that with you, yeah. Let's see, what else? Okay, content that encourages or surprises. You guys are creating content that can encourage people on their financial paths and takes twists. And then, of course, the entertaining portion of it. So, you know, funny content's great. I don't really know too many financial advisors who have tried funny. Usually we try to be very serious. Are you funny? Yeah. Oh. I'm like, sorry, I put you on the spot. I thought you were like, I'm funny. You know, and a lot of advisors, especially if you work in a firm where you have older partners, they're like, no, we are, you know, concierge, you know, advisors. Is anyone here, like, does anyone here work with younger investors? Like millennials, Gen Y, Gen X? And then is everybody else baby boomer types? Like what are, like, give me a sense for your demographic. 60 and over, okay. Well, 60 and older folks are funny too. You know, like, you know, funny won't work for every brand. So, but if there are ways that you can incorporate humor, it will help you stand out in this crowded marketplace. If you can do it tastefully. And maybe it's not jokes, maybe it's not ha-ha funny, but maybe it's just pleasantry. Like, maybe it is just helping to make finances not feel so complicated, which I think a lot of you wind up helping your clients through anyway, but making it feel like day-to-day relevant. Like, how do you choose between, you know, when you go, well, this probably isn't really relevant to your audience because they actually have money, but like going to the grocery store and like trying to pick, you know, which brands that they should be buying. Like, there's just like the day-to-day financial decisions that people have to make that have nothing to do with their investment portfolio, you know? Yeah. Yeah. I think that if you're comfortable with that level of transparency, do it. So anything that you wind up writing should be authentic, right? Like, that is, you know, number one, you know, be true to your voice, be true to your brand, and whatnot. I mean, I'm sure I'm going to like drop some names here just because these are folks that I'm close to in the industry. Like a Mary Beth Storjahan or Brian Preston and Bo, you know, from the Money Guy show. Oh God, like they wear their brand on their sleeves. You know, you go to their brands, their websites, their podcasts and whatnot, and they're just completely, I mean, Mary Beth wrote her book and, you know, she talks about how her history with money was, what it was like growing up in her household. That's a story, like she has a story, and you guys have stories too. That doesn't mean everybody, it doesn't mean people, you know, are entitled to know your story, but as much information as you are wanting to disclose, you know, because some firms, you have, I don't know, like 20 plus advisors in them. So, you know, you might not want the firm to just be all about one person. But when it comes to engaging with your audiences and like the newsletter, for instance, you could make your newsletter personal. Like, hey, here are my thoughts. Like, oh my gosh, you wouldn't believe what happened to me this week, you know, and take an ordinary life event of getting your kids ready, going to school, and, you know, realizing that you know, didn't deposit something in the, like whatever the story is. Like, it could just be so ordinary, but that's what people can relate to. I'm told I only have 2 minutes left. I can't believe the time has gone by that quickly. So since I only have 2 minutes left, I wanted to go through the editorial calendar and then have questions. Do you want one? Do you want me to go over an editorial calendar real quick? Okay. So your editorial calendar, use an Excel spreadsheet. I'm going to run through this really quickly so you guys have time to ask questions. Your editorial calendar is going to include your topic, whether it's your blog post, a quotable image, a video, whatever that piece of content is, that's going to be in your one column. Your next column is going to be what kind of media is it? Is it a podcast? Is it a blog post? Is it a shared piece of content? So you have original content that you'll create. You're going to have curated content, which is other people's content. You share his content, he shares yours. You know, you read an article on Forbes, you share that, that's curated content. You're a filter for your audience. Do that maybe 20% of the time because it shows like it's not all about me. I'm also, you know, sourcing the World Wide Web for content for you. So that's the second column. The third one is what category. Okay, so when you go back to what I was talking about with the types of content that we're creating and what we're trying to accomplish, you might want to be hitting certain categories of content. I want to talk about personal finance, you know, specifically. I want to talk something about investments. I want to talk money behaviors, you know. And the reason why I have you put this on an editorial calendar is so that you can make sure that you're not like overloading on one particular area. You keep the variety going. And so when you have this in a spreadsheet, you can see it all well organized, and you could know before you schedule things out or before you create things like, oh, okay, I have a good mix here. And then any assets that you need. So if you have visual content or anything like that, just note that if you need assets created for that. That could be a visual meme. It could be you're doing a video. It could be you need to put like a quote together. Whatever assets. And not all content will have assets, by the way. But you have it here. The next column is your publish time. So this should just be a recurring column, but the reason why you put that in there in your editorial calendar is you know when everything's going to get scheduled out and you're following a schedule and you're sticking to it. It's just documenting what you're going to do, and then it's easier for you to act on it. Then any links that you have. So your next column, you'll have links of any of your content. Articles to your own podcast. Why? Because when you go into your scheduling software, it's going to be real easy to go to your editorial calendar and just copy and paste, you know, just kind of move it over. And then any authors. So like I said, you might have folks in your office, multiple people creating content. Who's responsible for which pieces of content? Put that in your editorial calendar so that you can see, okay, Jim is responsible for this one, and here's the deadline for it. And so is anybody here using an editorial calendar right now? Does yours sound similar to what mine?
Well, since I only write blogs, I don't have that column of what kind of content.
Yeah.
And since I'm the only person, I don't have an assignment. But pretty much everything else, I mean, the one idea that I took away is I need to go back and assign everything to a specific category. Sometimes I did, sometimes I didn't.
Mm-hmm.
And I need to go back and curate that and make sure I can put it into a basket.
Yeah.
Put that column. But yes, everything else is pretty good.
Yeah, sometimes like with the original content, like your blog post, you might want to have a separate tab that's just blog posts and all your titles, deadlines for when those should be written, and then the dates that you're going to publish those. And then on your editorial calendar, it gets mixed in with everything else, like on a publishing thing. And I'll tell you, okay, so like one of my favorite things, because, you know, we're all organized, right? Like you guys are financial advisors, so you're pretty organized as well. But when I share an editorial calendar with a client, and they're like, wow, it's just organized. Like, oh, it doesn't seem so like, oh, I'm just shooting at my hip here. Like I'm just throwing things out there and there's no rhyme or reason. You know, it takes maybe an hour of your time, and then it's just organized and it's easier for you to execute on. That is the point of the organization, so you can actually execute on it and stay consistent.